Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to our HR webinar today. Hope everybody is doing good. We're all in a different environment. Some things going on we've never had to deal with before, and we know everybody's in a different situation. So feel free. Like I said, today is balancing business concerns while keeping staff employed. We're going to learn a few things today, and also it's Open Mic Wednesday. So there's no question you can't ask. If you need some information, feel free to ask those things. A couple of things I want to go over real quick is a few housekeeping things. If you haven't participated in a Zoom call before, notice some things at the bottom of your screen. You will see a chat or a question and answer button. You guys are in attendee mode only, so you can only see us, and so we can't see you. So some of you don't know if you're working at home or what you're doing, but you are good there, so we can't see you. But if you've got questions, please ask those questions. I'll try to get to those as we go along. And at the end, again, you can ask questions during, but at the end, we'll also open it up for a Q&A session. So if some things we did not cover, some things that that come to mind during, feel free to send us those questions. So I'll try and pay attention to what's going on over here in the Q&A box as well. So keep that in mind. So we are, again, in some different times, and we want to bring value to you and be able to keep you educated. If we don't know the answer to something today, we will definitely get back to you with that. So we want to throw that out there to you. Today, we have Elizabeth Brackett. Now, you will see I goofed up her spelling of her last name, and I couldn't fix it. So it's not Barkett or whatever I put there. It's Elizabeth Brackett. I don't know how I goofed that up, but Elizabeth is a SPHR senior, whatever you call it, Elizabeth. I goofed it up again. And a SHRM, there you go, and a certified HR professional. She has over 25 years of HR experience, including consulting across diverse industries, including banking and financial services, manufacturing, retail, and companies. She provides expert advice, counsel, and implementation in all areas of HR, crafting HR policies and best practices, and ensuring compliance. So we have Elizabeth with us here today, and I know you're going to enjoy what she has to bring to the table today. And again, pay attention. And again, I've got the Q&A box open up here. So if questions come up during her presentation, I'll definitely bring those out too. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Elizabeth and let her talk to us today on balancing those business concerns and keeping staff employed, which is, what we really want to do. So Elizabeth, it's all yours.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen so that everybody can jump on with me with the PowerPoint. Everybody see the PowerPoint?
If you can't see that or having problems, you can just send a quick question to us and we'll make sure we get things fixed. But you should be able to see her PowerPoint at this time.
Okay, great. So good morning, everybody. And let me just say to Marty, thanks for having me here today. This is not our usual method of conducting training and educating colleagues, but we're doing the best we can in the times we live in. Like Marty said, I have been doing HR for 25 plus years, which makes me feel old, but I have been around a while. Always in North Carolina and South Carolina, and I'm originally from South Carolina and have been working in HR in Charlotte since 1997, supporting a lot of different companies, so hopefully that'll come in handy for everybody. I always laughingly tell people that I am in charge of how do I do it? What do I do? Or, oh my gosh, I already did it, and how much trouble am I in? So those are my typical clients, and that's where I like to be. So we're going to talk today specifically about trying to find ways to reduce payroll costs without having to lay people off. So with that being said, the first thing that I want to talk about is obviously opportunities that you may have as a company to do things other than lay people off. So the first thing that I want to talk about is something called a rolling layoff. This is something in line with asking people or deciding that you want to lay people off a week at a time, 2 weeks at a time, a month at a time. So rather than making a decision, a final decision about laying X number of people off permanently, what I am suggesting to my clients is they look at something like a rolling layoff. There are some rules about doing this, notification rules in particular. So if you are going to do something, you want to give people notification in writing, and you want to give it to them as early as possible. So the sooner the better is always the case when it comes to communicating with employees. When you look at laying off a non-exempt employee, and by non-exempt, I mean hourly, somebody that is eligible for overtime and is classified as an hourly employee on your payroll. So that one's pretty straightforward. If you have an hourly employee and they don't do any work today, you don't have to pay them, correct? So if you have a exempt employee, a salaried exempt employee is the term. So in other words, they're an exempt employee and they make a straight salary. They make, $800 a week or whatever the number is. That person, there are some real specific rules about them being laid off and not being paid anything. So it has to be that they are laid off for a week. And the week, according to the Department of Labor, which is the agency that enforces this, that has nothing to do with Monday through Friday. What they want you to look at is your payroll week. And so that is for your payroll, y'all might pay Saturday at midnight to the following Saturday at 11:59 p.m. Your payroll company will know what your payroll week is. If you don't, it's not uncommon for employers not to know what their payroll week is. So your payroll company can tell you exactly what that is if you don't know it. But with that being said, you have to lay an exempt person off for an entire work week. And that's the only way that you can get away with paying them zero for that week. In the wage and hour laws, it is very specific that an exempt employee, to be paid zero, must perform no work. So let me expand upon that a little bit. They can perform no work. And that's exactly what it means. So don't think real quick, let me get him on a conference call. Don't think real quick, let me ask him to come in and sign these checks. That is absolutely against the rules. So the exempt employee, the salaried exempt employee that you are thinking about perhaps laying off for a work week and paying them zero, totally fine. But they can't perform any work. So tell them, don't check your email, don't check your voicemail, don't jump on any conference calls this week. And that's the only way that this will work legitimately as far as the Department of Labor is concerned. The other thing that sometimes comes off when we talk about rolling layoffs or laying people off a week at a time is they want to use their PTO. Can they use their PTO? Maybe the next question. That is completely and totally up to you. As far as the wage and hour laws are concerned and the Department of Labor is concerned, PTO is a gift that you give employees. So as far as South Carolina is concerned and federal laws are concerned, you can gift it. And then, you know, if you want to tell people that they can take it that week that they're laid off, that's fine. But here's some things to remember. If you let them use PTO, are you saving any money? You know, I mean, the goal of this is to save some payroll money to get us over this hump that we're in right now. So you probably want to tell people, no, I'm not going to have people using their PTO during their layoff weeks. You know, this is an opportunity for us to save money. So I'm going to move on to volunteers. You would be remiss to not ask employees if anybody wants to be laid off, at least temporarily, during this time. It is worth asking. It goes a long way in terms of making employees feel that they are invested in this process. So if the right employees volunteer, great. Tell them thanks for their volunteering and go ahead and put them on a temporary layoff status. And if the wrong people volunteer, tell them you really appreciate their offer, but you can't afford to spare them right now. So there's nothing that requires you to say yes to whoever volunteers. So if you put it out there that you are looking for volunteers for people to be laid off temporarily during this time, first of all, you may be shocked as far as who's interested in volunteering. You know, I have had situations in the past where, you know, I didn't know all the circumstances of what was going on at home. I didn't know what was going on as far as the person's, you know, the person wanted to go on a mission trip to South America and they had been putting it off and putting it off. And we were in a situation in 2008 where we asked for volunteers and people came forward and said, you know, if this is an opportunity, I really want to say yes to my church sending me to South America to build houses. And I've never been able to do it because I didn't have the time off, but taking a sabbatical may be something that people are interested in. So again, I would always recommend that you ask for people to step forward during this time. And you can always say yes to the right people and no to the wrong people. And there's nothing wrong with that. Reducing employees' pay is the next thing that I want to talk about. And this is tricky territory that we are wading into. So when we reduce employees' pay, we can do it a number of different ways. So let's talk about the exempt versus non-exempt rules. Okay, so you have an exempt or salaried employee versus a non-exempt hourly employee. Exempt employees are required to be paid on a salary basis, meaning their wages can't fluctuate like an hourly employee's wages do. So if I'm an hourly employee and I work 38 hours this week and I make $10 an hour, you pay me $3.80. If I am an exempt salaried employee and I make $800 a week and this week I work 38 hours a week, there is nothing you can do about it. You cannot dock my wages because I'm a salaried exempt employee and I get paid my salary. Now you can always pay me 2 hours of PTO to get me to 40. That's fine. But again, docking the wages of an exempt employee will end up getting you into hot water with the Department of Labor. And again, that's the agency that investigates this. So You can, in these times, do a handful of things around reducing employees' pay, and that's what I want to talk about here. So quickly, for a non-exempt employee, they just have to be paid minimum wage and overtime. So at the end of the day, the state that they're working in has an overtime law, federal has an overtime law, they have a minimum wage law. That's what a non-exempt employee has to be paid. The fact that you pay somebody $14.75, $18.75, $27 an hour, whatever the number is, that is above and beyond what the state and federal require. So for your non-exempt hourly employees, you could be paying them the federal minimum wage, and as long as you are paying them the federal minimum wage or the state minimum wage, whichever is higher, plus overtime, you are within the letter of the law. So you could certainly reduce their pay. In South Carolina, you've got to do it in writing and give them 7 days notice. Let me say that again. South Carolina, you got to give them 7 days notice, and you got to give it to them in writing when you start messing with their money. For your exempt salaried employees, they have to make at least $684 a week. That's the federal standard. So as long as they're making $684 a week salary, you could take them down to that number and still be within the letter of the law. Now, a couple of thoughts about doing that. If you could do this in a number of different ways. You could reduce everyone's pay, for example, by, let's say, 10%. Everybody's going to take a 10% pay cut across the board. If your non-exempt employees are still making minimum wage and your exempt employees are making at least $684, you are within the letter of the law. Another thing that I have suggested is somewhat of a tiered salary cut. For example, everybody takes a 30% pay cut at the leadership level. Everybody takes a 20% pay cut at the non-leadership level. So I would just encourage y'all to run the numbers and look at doing something like that versus laying people off initially. So these are some options as far as thinking through what can we do instead of laying people off permanently.
Elizabeth,
sorry?
One quick question. We've got some North Carolina attendees. What is the notification if you're going to change salary for North Carolina?
24 hours is the notification rules in South Carolina. But with that being said, my answer is always more notice is better than less. So 7 days is South Carolina, 24 hours is North Carolina. But honestly, when you're messing with people's money, give them as much notice as you can, is my answer. So, you know, for reducing people's pay, again, you can do an across the board cut, or you can do a tiered cut based on levels in the organization. But at the end of that equation, you need to make sure that you've got people making at least minimum wage and you've got people making at least $684 a week if they're salaried exempt. The other thing that I want to mention too is when it comes to exempt employees, it can't fluctuate a lot. So if you do this, you can't do this, well, this week you can't set it up like, well, this week we're going to do this, and next week we're going to do that, and this week we're going to do this, and next week we're going to do that. That will not work. The term is that will defeat the exemption. So you are inviting the wage and hour department into your organization if you try and do something like that. This needs to be until further notice, this is the way it's going to be. So the other thing that you may want to think about doing is you can never take a non-exempt hourly employee and pay them as a salaried exempt employee. But the reverse is absolutely true. So if you want to take your exempt salaried employees and change them to hourly employees, that is absolutely within the letter of the law. So I might have exempt employees that make $1,000 a week, but they're not working $1,000 a week. I don't need them to work $1,000 a week. Maybe I've got them working from home right now. Honestly, they're working a lot less than they would be if they were in the office every day. So I can change those employees to non-exempt hourly. Let me say that again. I can't take non-exempt hourly employees and change them to salaried exempt. Not allowed. But I can always take exempt salaried employees and change them to hourly. So it may be that you want to reclassify your exempt salaried employees as non-exempt hourly employees, give them a rate of pay that's at least minimum wage, and tell them until further notice they need to submit a timesheet, and they're going to be paid X amount per hour plus overtime. So again, it can't be 1 week on, 1 week off as far as messing with people's money, but you could certainly put something out there in writing, 24 hours, 7 days notice that says, until further notice, you're going to be paid as an hourly employee, and I need to get your timesheet every whatever your rule is. So that would be a legitimate opportunity as well. If you want to take an exempt person's salary and reduce it, let's say that I'm going to give everybody at the management level a 30% pay cut. I don't have to cut their work by 30% also. The way that salaried exempt work is you get paid your salary for however much work you do. So, just think about life under normal circumstances. If you work 30 hours this week and 50 hours next week and 60 hours next week and 80 hours the following week, and then you're back to 40 hours, your salary doesn't change if you're a salaried exempt employee. It is just the luck of the draw. So that is also true in this situation. So if I'm going to make all my exempt employees take a 30% pay cut until further notice, that is a perfectly legitimate salary reduction. It does not have to also correspond with a reduction in work. If I want to do that, I can. So let me give you an example. I have an exempt employee. She works 5 days a week. I'm going to cut her pay by 20%. If I want to, I can also tell her she is off on Fridays. I am not required to. If I need her to jump on a call on Friday, I can make her. She's an exempt employee and she gets paid her salary regardless of the number of hours that she works in a work week. But if you want to do this, you can. So you can cut their work corresponding to what their pay cut is if you choose to as an organization. Okay, I'm going to stop and take a breath and see if there's any questions. Marty?
All right. Any questions? Don't forget, at the bottom, some of you came in a little bit late. There is a Q&A button on the bottom. If you've got any kind of questions, now's the time to throw those at us, and I'll get those over to Elizabeth on those. So if there are no questions, nobody's posted anything at the moment. Like I said, once I see those, if we're on a particular topic, I'll go ahead and let Elizabeth answer those as we go through. But it's all you. No questions.
Okay. So the other thing that I'll mention before I move off of pay and temporary layoffs is you may want to consider job sharing. So that is something that employers can look at. It's a type of layoff. So if I'm the HR person and I have a second in command at the manufacturing company, it may be that she and I could job share. So I'm laid off this week, she's laid off next week, and we job share the HR role. And that is, again, another alternative to think of as far as laying people off. You know, I'd like to think that layoff is a last resort for most of the employers that are out there. So, you know, this is an opportunity for you guys to think outside the box a little bit. So I'm going to jump to the next page and just talk a little bit about benefit changes. So other cost saving ideas. One is your 401k. Right now, employers, for the most part, are still matching employees' 401ks. Stop. If you can, legally, within your plan documents, stop your match, that would be the first thing that I would do. The other thing is, what other employee benefits do you offer that could be put on pause right now? I would be contacting my insurance carriers and other employee benefits that I pay for and see what opportunities are out there for me to save any money that I can. What sort of business expenses do I have? I was talking to a company this morning, and they were doing coffee service, still paying for all the cell phone that the employees had. They were still covering corporate credit cards that had lunches on them. They're still paying car insurance for cars that aren't going anywhere. They have machine leases that they could suspend. So there are things out there that could be paused, put on hold. Employee assistance programs. That, on the other hand, may be something that you want to be sure employees know about. I would not recommend suspending that in these crazy times. I would recommend you reaching out to employees and making sure that if you have an EAP, is what they're called, if you have an employee assistance program, that now's the time that your employees should know about it. So the last thing that I'll say is solicit ideas from your employees. They know your business as well as you do, at least on the front lines. So they may be aware of things that are a cost savings idea that you may not have even thought of. The example that I just gave about the corporate credit card, that actually didn't come from one of the leaders in the organization. That came from somebody that was in the accounting department. And she said, she brought it up, this company created a cost savings focus group, so to speak. And this lower level accounting employee is the one that processes expense reports. And she's the one that brought up the fact that, you know, people were still submitting their corporate credit cards like it was business as usual. And the fact that they had gotten takeout from McAllister's Deli 5 days last week, the company was still picking up the tab for that. So things like that need to be suspended. If you have a policy that you reimburse, oh, there's Marty.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
All right. Before we go, something just went totally bonkers. Let me pull this up before I know where we are here. Is everybody? Can somebody send me a message and say you're back on? Okay, good. Barbara's there. All right, good deal. All right, sorry about that. I don't know what happened. The internet just went completely bonkers here in the office. So go ahead. And I can't remember the last thing, Elizabeth, you said, so you might want to back up a minute.
Okay, so I was just saying that the ideas from employees are going to be the best place to solicit ideas because they know the business and they're on the front line. So I was suggesting that employers look at their employees to get ideas about saving money. Any questions?
Now, I'm going to go ahead and tell you real quick. I did have, before I forget, Ginger's question a little bit earlier. Ginger is at a church, And of course, there's no church services going on. I don't think this is an issue, but you said they had to let a part-time person go who cleans the church. I'm assuming as long as they're letting her go, furlough, get unemployment. She just was this going to be any kind of issue?
So that's an interesting question because it is a church. So that's what makes it interesting. Historically, churches were exempt from unemployment. So if you were an employee of a church, you could not collect unemployment depending on what state you're in. And I don't know specifically what the rules are around churches, but in most states, churches are exempt from overtime. Exempt from unemployment. So working for a church, you typically could not get unemployment. Now, I know that is under review. That is one of the questions that has been posed as far as the federal unemployment stipend is concerned, the state's unemployment is concerned. This is something that they are looking at trying to figure out, and I have not heard anything for South Carolina as far as unemployment and church employees are concerned. I think I read yesterday that that North Carolina had that question specifically posed to it for unemployment, and that they were reviewing it. So I would assume South Carolina is doing the same thing.
Okay. All right. We've got another question from Barbara. It says, when making these pay changes, what is the suggestion for policy changes as well as getting these out to all the employees?
So I'm not sure what she means about policy changes. My guess would be that maybe she's talking about, for example, if exempt employees are eligible for ABC, but if I'm going to change them to a non-exempt employee, they're not going to be eligible anymore.
Hey, Barbara, if you want to clarify that, just send me an updated message on that one, and we'll double.
Yeah, I'm happy.
Well, here we go. Here we go. If I look a little bit further down, I'd be able to see if we're to do a 90-day less pay or less benefits. Like if you're gonna give them less pay for 90 days, or take away some benefits, or change some benefits, that sort of that's what she was talking about.
Okay. So I wouldn't worry about changing anything specifically in my policy manual. I would simply communicate that the payroll change is going to be effective. In her example, she used 90 days, and that as far as the corresponding policies are concerned, if she's talking about her handbook and things, I wouldn't necessarily worry about that at this time, unless she has to. So, for example, some companies have gone to unlimited PTO for their exempt employees. So if I wanted to take all my employees and change them to a non-exempt status, I could do that, but I would also pause and say, those employees will also be PTO, unlimited PTO will also be paused for those employees as well. So I would make the policy correspond to what the change is if I can, but I wouldn't try and start amending all my handbook policies right now for something that, God willing, is going to be quickly over.
Okay. All right. That's it. That's all the questions we have at the moment.
Okay. So, paging down to the next, communicate. This is a time of uncertainty for employees, and the best advice I can give you during uncertain times is communicate more than you think is necessary. Even if it is just to touch base with the employees, I know that I had one employer that I talked to, and this was his employees had been sent home to work for the first 2 weeks of this. And when I talked to him about, what had he been saying to his employees, he hadn't. Because he said, I don't have anything to report. I'm in a holding pattern. I'm waiting to see what's going on with Trump's stimulus package. I'm waiting to see what's going on with unemployment. I'm waiting to see everything. And so there's been nothing to report. And my advice to him was, but there are things to report. You and the leadership have been meeting every day at 2:00 to talk about things. You have called me half a dozen times to figure out how to save money. So there are things that you could be communicating to your employees, even just to let them know that you are thinking about them. The employees want to feel cared for. They want to feel thought of. And even if this does end up being a situation where you have to lay somebody off or lay somebody off temporarily, they want to know that this was something that was weighed upon heavily at the leadership level. So communicating with them is the best way that you can do that. Again, involve your employees in maybe not the decision making, but certainly in the ideas process. The more employees are involved, the more buy-in they will have in this process. They will be invested in this. Communicate bravely. Try and tell them as much and be reassuring to them. I saw an interesting statistic not long ago that said employees that file a discrimination charge with the EEOC, when they ask those employees coming out of the EEOC whether they had been treated illegally or unfairly, 70%, 69 point something percent said that they did not believe that they had been treated illegally, but felt that they had been treated unfairly. They had been treated badly. So let me just let that resonate a minute. So people walking out of the EEOC office after filing a discrimination change said, nope, 70% of them said, nope, I don't think my employer treated me illegally, but they treated me badly. It wasn't fair. And so that was discrimination charges that are going to end up on employers' desks, and they're going to have to spend time and money fighting those discrimination charges when, if they had treated the employees better, fairly, it might have been avoided. So that is part of what this process is, being sure that employees feel that they have been involved, that they've been cared for, that the employer's done the best they can, even if it ends up being a layoff. I had in 2008, I had a building company that I was working with, and they are one of the best stories because they did it right. They talked to employees, they had town halls with employees. At the end of the day, the senior leadership cut their own pay to the bone. They suspended bonuses. They asked for volunteers. They let people take unpaid sabbaticals that wanted them. They did job sharing. But one of the things that they did most importantly was they said to employees, we're gonna have to cut everything to the bone, including mine and yours. And the owner said, if you will hang in there with me, I will do my best to hang in there with you. and not cut into the meat of the organization. And we're all in this together, et cetera, et cetera. And when we came out of it, the recession, he had promised people that he would take care of them. And he did. He gave everybody retro bonuses. He gave people retro money where he could. He got everybody's pay to back up to what the standard was. And he lost very few employees during that time. And his good ones hung in there with him, stayed with him. And now his business has grown quantifiably. And the reality is, you know, I say to employers, that's the story that you want your employees to be telling about you and your company during this time. So try and think about what sort of story are your employees going to tell after this is over. And fingers crossed, you'll be one of the good stories that we'll all be talking about down the road. Any questions?
All right, everybody, just a quick reminder, you know, we're all in this. We're all in this differently. So, you know, some of you may not have had any issues at the moment. You may not see things happening for another month or 2 or 3 down the road. Some of you are going through some things right now. But everybody's situation is different. So if you've got a question, throw it out there. You may have that question that somebody else has that they don't want to ask that question, because that's just, you know, how we are sometimes. So if you've got those questions, throw those out there. And as we move forward, and like I said, at the end, we'll also open it back up for kind of some off-the-wall questions as well. But right now, nobody has any questions. So, so that is at this moment. We want to, you know, like I said, respect your time. We've been going here about 45 minutes. And does anybody have anything, any kind of questions? Before we go, I'm gonna throw Elizabeth's information out there to be able to contact her. And so do that before I let you go. Let me share this screen real quick. So here is Elizabeth's contact information. You see that below. You see her cell number, and there's her email address. Elizabeth does consulting work. She's and some of y'all may have known her if she was part of the Employer Association. She worked there for 13 years, and maybe dealt with some of you in there as well. So use her resources if you need that. If you need her to do a presentation or something, that's why we're doing these. So that's her contact information there. If you need anything from us, you know where we are. The idea here is to do these more often and do these at least once a month in order to keep you educated and make sure I stop sharing so you don't see all my goodies. And so let me see. Before we end, anybody throw your hand up. Anybody got any other questions before we go? Elizabeth, need to add anything else there?
Make sure everybody's got their new posters up. So with all these changes, there's a new posting requirement for employers, and putting it up in the office where nobody's at doesn't count. So you want to go to the DOL and look at the DOL website and look at the new posting requirements under the expanded FMLA regulations for the family cares and families first, coronavirus, all that. So putting it up in the office where nobody's at doesn't count. So email it to everybody, put it in a payroll stuffer, figure out a way to send everybody a link if that's the case. But again, that's a mandatory poster update. But there's no reason that you need to all order new posters, which I know a lot of poster vendors are blowing up people's email, telling them they're going to go to jail and get a $10,000 fine. Do not worry about ordering new posters. Just go on the website, pull up the posting, print it, put it up on your bulletin board, and email it to all your folks, and you'll be fine.
You cannot put it in the utility closet, so you got to stick it out there where you see it. So
it has
that's
to be
good.
Where everybody has the opportunity to see it. So,
All right. What's the website again? Somebody had that question.
the DOL, Department of Labor.
Okay, there you go. Department of Labor, DOL, I think it's DOL maybe .gov, and that's where you get that information.
Yeah.
Any other quick questions before we end it for today? Like I said, look for some emails down the road. We'll bring up some additional topics as those warrant. So we appreciate you coming today and getting educated. That's the key thing here. So again, we appreciate you. If you need Elizabeth, you've got her contact information. Hope all is well. Stay safe, and we'll see you on the next go around.
Okay, thank you.